Signage is all around us, yet it's a topic that rarely gets discussed in street photography, even though focusing on it offers multiple benefits. I want to examine great photographers who have taken this subject seriously to create projects, what was involved in creating those projects, and why we might consider taking these types of photos ourselves. This is Examining Signage in Street Photography. This video is brought to you by Incogni. Go to incogni.com/developingtank and use the code developingtank to get 60% off an annual plan. If you're living in a quiet place, it's a day when not much is going on, you're new to street photography and still a bit timid about capturing images of people, or you're a seasoned vet going through a period of creative blockage, then signage might be a subject matter you can work with to create something compelling. While photos revolving around this topic most likely won't receive instant gratification, or even be looked at as great photographic achievements, this is one of those subjects that works for posterity, lends itself to long-term exploration, and has the potential to become historically significant over time. Friedlander is probably the most notable photographer to create work based around this subject matter. An exhibition that was later turned into a book called Signs was held in 2019. It consisted of 50 years worth of signed photos. According to this exhibition, since the early 1960s, Friedlander has focused on signs that inscribe the American landscape, from hand-lettered ads to storefront windows to massive billboards. The variety of signs that show up in this book that are also harder to come by now is a clear-cut example of how much diversity there is in the mundane, and how so many aspects of our everyday lives go overlooked. These things might seem worthless in the moment, but when looked at later, they show us a world that is so much different from the one we're currently experiencing. Even if this doesn't compel you to make images of signs, it might cause you to reconsider what you're not photographing today that you won't be able to capture later on. Plenty of people put so much stock in being original, but the legacy of street photography and carrying on projects that others have created before us in different times and different places should be something that we attempt to do as street photographers, because the documentary aspect of this art form shouldn't be overlooked, and so much of what is able to be covered in street in completely original ways has already been done. Most photography is derivative anyways, in one way or another, so why not continue these projects with your own spin, adaptation, or unique voice? Friedlander himself was an example of carrying on that legacy. Walker Evans was a major influence on the work of Friedlander, and there are examples that we can point to that show that influence specifically, just by simply looking at the topic of signage and the many street photos he created around it. On this topic, Walker stated, "Lettering and signs are very important to me. There are infinite possibilities, both decorative in itself and as popular art, as folk art, and also as symbolism and meaning, and surprise and double meaning. It's a rich field." I've lived in Bangkok long enough now that I've walked around certain areas more times than I can count. In the places I normally go to, it's hard to find a random street or alley I haven't gone down before, but chasing after different subject matter has my eyes peeled for signs and wide open for the possibility of finding them. I mentioned Fred Herzog in the video about photographing the same places, and he was an inspiration on this video as well. He walked the streets of Vancouver for decades, and a reoccurring element of many of his photos was signage. On this topic, he stated, "Signs are a very, very important pictorial part of the American city. I won't even say pictorial, an important cultural part of the American city. If you take the Coca-Cola and other signs away from America downtown, you have nothing. Maybe some interesting architecture, but not very much. The neon signs and the soft drink signs, the cigarette ads and the billboards, and the posters and the graffiti and the collages of torn off posters, all that contributes to make a city a place where art actually happens. That kind of casual art, overlapping posters, can be very interesting. Those posters illustrate the city, even if people are not there." But here's the weird part. The more you start paying attention to signs, like really noticing them, the more you realize how many are aimed directly at you. Advertisements, warnings, instructions. It's like the world is screaming for your attention. And online, it's even worse. You're not just seeing signs, you are one. To data brokers, you're like a glowing neon billboard sign that says, "Track me, sell me, profit off me." That's why I use Incogni. They fight back against that. Incogni automatically reaches out to dozens or even hundreds of data brokers and gets your personal information removed. Your name, address, phone number, all that stuff you didn't even know was floating around out there. You can get an exclusive 60% off an annual plan by going to incogni.com/developingtank and using the code developingtank at checkout. And if you're not satisfied, you'll be protected by their 30-day money-back guarantee. That's incogni.com/developingtank. What I'm really working towards is a long-term project that includes all facets of Bangkok that I can think of. And I'll agree with Herzog that those torn posters can be extremely interesting and create some great abstract photography. All of these separate topics and different kinds of signs might be insignificant on their own, but they can work as part of a larger sequence, which includes images of torn posters. Torn posters can be found in the work of many great street photographers, but one who created a ton of these images was Ernst Haas, and Haas felt that they could contribute to the diversity of his sequencing. According to the writer and curator David Company, in the Ernst Haas book titled Abstract, he had long thought of photographs not as isolated images, but as elements to be linked in poetic sequences. This could be achieved across printed pages, or along gallery walls, and in very different ways on a screen. Haas was a great music lover, and often thought of photography through the metaphors of melody, harmony, and rhythm. So if you discount signs as a weird subject matter that you don't really want to photograph, maybe allow yourself to reconsider it in the grand scheme of a larger body of work. In my estimation, few things show a time period more in street photos than cars, fashion, and signage. The styles of today will become the styles of yesterday soon enough, and the ways and places signage are displayed will eventually show us change too. From the hand-lettered signs of bygone eras that still exist in limited capacities today, to the ridiculously huge screens that we have now to display advertisements, something new is always around the corner. In 1963, Ed Ruscha created a book titled 26 Gasoline Stations, and it shows exactly that in its pages. Ruscha said, "I just wanted to explore the subject dead ahead, straight on, without much emotion," when asked about how and why he created the project. Regardless of his reasoning, the images have gone on to be considered in two different ways. One is that they show how the landscape of the American West had changed, as lands were taken over by the expansion of roadways that hadn't previously populated the region. They also give us context for comparing the world of the 1960s, in that region specifically, to how it looks and feels today. What occurred to me when taking on this experiment is how many signs have absolutely no words. When I started, I was thinking about how weird this project was because I can't read or speak Thai. So without using Google Translate at every single sign that I wanted to take a picture of, I have no idea what any of them say. The more I've created these photos, the more I've come to think about how even without text, these images hold cultural significance, because a lot of them have images that you just wouldn't find any other place in the world. The durian buster stands out as a prime example of this. For those who have never come into contact with durian, the smell can be extremely pungent and has a tendency to linger, so it's banned from most public transit and public places. Graffiti is a sign type that has a similar kind of context. Only those informed about the art form really know what any of it means for the most part, and it can be readily found in any major city. A photographer who dedicated a lot of time to photographing graffiti was Martha Cooper. On the importance of this documentation, she stated, "Photography was important because photos were often the only proof of illegal subway pieces. In the 1980s, few writers had good cameras, so my skills as a photographer were my route to acceptance." And on why she decided to focus so much attention on graffiti before deciding to become a professional photographer. I thought I would like to work in an anthropology museum because I had a long-standing interest in ethnic art. I spent a year at Oxford at the Pitt Rivers Museum getting a diploma in ethnology, and then worked on collections at the Peabody Museum at Yale and the Smithsonian. At Oxford, I learned how important it is to look at art in the context of the cultures that produce it. Graffiti gave me a wonderful opportunity to do that. For context here, she also created projects that revolve around how kids play. She continues saying, "As an aside, I'm not interested in kids' games with rules. That's a different area of study. My interest is in creative play without rules. Activities kids invent by themselves, when their parents aren't watching. Graffiti is a good example." I hate shooting street photography at night for the most part. A major part of this is that I usually have to wake up at around 4:30 or 5 to go to work, so going out and shooting at night isn't really possible. But I decided to do a bit of it here for the sake of exploring new opportunities, and so that I can talk about this next photographer. One photographer who's created images that stand out, even though they're created in places that have been shot to death, is Liam Wong. His books After Dark and Tokyo were two of the earliest photo books that I purchased, and they stand as a great example of how you can make something unique with slight modifications to what's already been done. After Dark in particular stands out for its wide aspect ratio. The dark rainy nights of Tokyo motivated him to create images just like it has for so many of us. As a video game developer, he He has a slightly different perspective from most photographers. He summed this up stating, "In video game development, we have a phrase called the 3 C's: character, controls, camera, as each component is interconnected to deliver the experience. With photography, I have my own set of 3 C's: content, composition, and color. As a street photographer, you observe what's in front of you, content, and compose yourself around the scene, composition. I'm a graphic designer, and so I just always imagine lines and grids when I shoot. The content itself is key, and in my opinion, what you leave out of the frame is just as important as what's in it." Something I heard Sir Roger Deakins say one time, and it always stuck with me. Like him, I often capture silhouettes. I like the anonymity of it. Yet, I'm always very selective of what exists within my frame, content. Lighting is important, and on the streets at night, working with artificial lighting and finding the angles is key. Color then acts as the finisher for me, where I think about channeling the mood through basic color theory, amplifying, balancing, or subtracting colors. When you combine all three, that's where the image presents itself. I want to continue to explore different topics in street photography, and I hope this kind of content will help propel you to do the same thing. If there's any super specific niche topics that you'd like me to cover like this, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thanks to Incogni for sponsoring this video. And until next time, keep developing.